Composition is one of the most important ways to tell stories with your photography. The relationship between different elements within a frame really impacts how a photo is received. In this video, I want to share with you how I use the 35mm lens to shoot different portraits and to tell different stories. Let's get it started. And if you're new to my channel, hey guys, what's up? My name is Tommy and I'm a portrait photographer based in Melbourne. It's been a long time since my last video. Regrettably, I've had a lot of work throughout this year, and now that we're in lockdown, I've got a bit more time to shoot some YouTube videos. Based on the positive feedback on my 35mm video last year, I wanted to make another one that's more updated and gives more recent examples of my work. Alright, here's our first example. The first thing that you'll notice about this photo is that it's pretty much fully symmetrical, and this really gives a feeling of harmony and balance within the photo. You can also see that the subject's face is right in the center of the photo, and what this does is that it gives equal importance to her, the model, and also the environment. The whole framing is quite symmetrical, but you'll also notice that her hair and her face are asymmetrical. They're on a bit of an angle, and what this does is that it contrasts with the symmetry of the photo, and then makes the photo a bit more interesting. I talk about this with more examples in the rest of the video, but generally if you have a very symmetrical framing and then one or two elements which are asymmetrical, those are the elements that will make the photo a bit more interesting. We've got another shot in the landscape orientation, and as you can see here, her eye level is just above the center line. What this does is that it gives more focus and emphasis on her rather than the environment. And instead of the more front-facing pose with the previous example, here we've got a side profile which also makes her look very flattering. Another interesting thing about the composition of this photo is the positioning of the light. As you can see, I purposely wanted to show the light within the frame and give the photo a more soft look. What I did here was position the light just to the right of her head so I can get that nice soft glow and also the backlighting in her hair. Alright, moving on to the next example, we have a more traditional style of portrait photo. Here again, you can see the subject's eyeline is above the center of the photo, which indicates more focus to her rather than the background. Another interesting thing to note is that her eye that's being covered by her hair is in the center of the frame, and her more exposed eye is on the side, which makes her photo again more interesting. Also, looking at her pose, her body is shifting more to the right as she is looking to the left, and this kind of contrast with an angle really makes the photo look again more dynamic and interesting. Here we've got a different photo shoot that I shot earlier this year. What you notice by this image is that it's quite evenly balanced. So you've got 1/3 sky, 1/3 of it being the subject, and then around 1/3 water. And all this being quite evenly balanced and in proportion makes it really easy to look at on the eye. Again, we're using the side profile of this shot in the center of the frame, and we've also got the light leak in the center of the frame as well. But if I could change one thing about this photo is that I would position her a little bit to the front just so she's quite evenly distributed within the whole water pool there and make it a really symmetrical shot. Here we've shot it at a different angle from the previous photo, and what this has allowed us to do is get her more in the center of the pool. Again, in this one, we've got quite an even distribution with the elements in the frame. You've got the sky, you've got the subject, and you've got the water. The interesting thing about here are the petals, and yes, I've done a little bit of Photoshop, but I've done it in a way to position the petals that makes it feel more optically balanced and harmonious. The positioning of the petals in this photo also give a sense of the direction and movement of the petals, which makes it feel more interesting and dynamic as well. Here we've got the third shot to complete the narrative, and as you can see, it's shot on a bit of an angle. This is called a Dutch angle, and it's when you intentionally angle your camera's horizon line to not be balanced. The reason why I did it here was because I wanted the photo to have a feeling of like being a snapshot in time or having a really candid moment where it's really imperfect, and that's why I went for a Dutch angle in this shot. I also have an alternative photo where her face is more covered, but I like this one better with her face exposed because what this does is that it shows more of her expression, and I want that feeling to come across a bit more in the photo as well. And as you can see here, you've got the petals distributed from the top left to the bottom right, and this really contrasts well with the subject's body line and angle as well. Moving on to the next photo, and this is your typical front-facing headshot photo. And what I find interesting about this kind of shot is that it's not always the most comfortable photo to look at, and this is because you're locking eyes directly with the subject. I usually reserve this composition for something that's a bit more heroic or more important in a photo, as it's quite jarring to look at. But here I use it to highlight the intensity of the subject's eyes and also the asymmetry of the mask. Also, again, looking at composition and lighting, one thing that I did here was have one light in the eye and the other light kind of in the shadows. And what this does again is that contrast of asymmetry and symmetry makes the photo more interesting to look at. Moving on to the next photo, and this is the kind of shot that you'll generally not have as your hero shot, but actually one that you'll use as part of a greater story. In this case, I wanted the photo to feel more emotional and really focusing on the body language. Here, that's why I've used around 2/3 of the framing as for the body, and then around 1/3 of the framing for the water. Again, we've got the subject framed in the center of the photo, and this gives a really easy direction for the eye to look at. And speaking of the eye direction of the photo, your eyes will first be drawn to the hat, and then it'll move down towards the body of the subject, and then to the details of the waves where you'll notice more of the water afterwards. Here's another typical example of a portrait composition that I'd love to shoot. You've got your half body shot, which is symmetrically framed and also tilted upwards. And this tilting upwards gives the subject more presence and more power within the frame. So I told the subject to turn her body 45 degrees to the side, and what this does is that it makes the photo feel more candid and natural and not so posed. And again, looking at the proportion of how things are framed in this photo, we see that she takes up around 2/3 of the frame, and then that leaves 1/3 of headspace. This is a formula that I love to use in a lot of my photos because it gives a lot of attention to the subject in the center, but also gives ample amount of space to focus on the environment as well. Our next example shows an extreme amount of headspace. As you can see here, this shot is focused on the scale of the environment in comparison to the subject. The top of the subject's head does not pass the center line, making her have less presence within the frame. And the fact that there's so much sky in the photo with its minimal blues, greys and whites really focuses on the photo being more clean and simple, which really makes the photo feel really harmonious. Lastly, we've got this shot. As you can see, it's a front-facing close-up shot, but only one half of the face is exposed. And what this does is makes the photo more interesting. Not only will you focus on one eye only, but also there's a really good relationship between the foreground objects and also the background objects, which is creating that bokeh as well. And again, looking at the position of the eye line in relationship with the distance of the subject and the camera, because it's so close, what I wanted to do was give more focus to the subject rather than the background. What I've done here again is to make the eye line just above the center of the frame, which makes more sense with a close-up shot like this. And those were my examples. Hopefully you found those explanations interesting and you learned a few more things about composition for portraits, especially using the 35mm. If you want to see more work from me, you can check out my Instagram or my Facebook, or you can follow me on TikTok as well, as I'm creating more content there. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. I really appreciate you all for sticking around even though I haven't posted in a long time. Hopefully I can post a few more things soon, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace!